And then we go to this, and we do this.
Have confidence. No confidence.
No confidence. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Charles' Chill Channel and my tier list. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, a tier list of Souls games, Souls-likes from Software games, and I have the Twitch chat with me today. Where's all the Armored Core games? Good question. I've not played any of them, so that is why I will not be ranking them. But a lot of people like to know what my favorite Souls games are, and would like to know my ranking. So yes, we're going to get right down to it. Say hello, everyone. Hello, YouTube. Hi.
Oh, hi.
Let's go. Let us begin. So, I'm going to start out with Bloodborne, because that is the one I am the most sure of. Let's get to it. Behold the tier list. Bloodborne, S tier. I would like to take the time to just give a short review for each one. Maybe I'll start in order of the ones I played. That would make a lot more sense, I think. Gimp Ninja Gaming! Hello there! Good to see you, and Marky Sor. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So the first game I ever played in the Souls series franchise from Software made was Dark Souls. And this, at the time, was the best game I'd ever played. I got very, very stuck in it at the gargoyles, and I thought, you know, this game is way too hard for me. I was really in the mood for a medieval fantasy game that's kind of like an MMO, but I didn't want to have to play an online-only MMO with multiplayer. So, I looked up medieval fantasy games on Xbox Store. That's where I first found Dark Souls, and I thought, you know, this says it's a horror game. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone and try it out, and I did, and Dark Souls is great. I loved the gritty realism, kind of reminded me of Lord of the Rings a little bit, but also even grittier, even darker, with the zombie apocalypse idea, and I really prefer the zombie apocalypse in a medieval setting. So, I really enjoyed that idea, because I'd never seen it before, and that in a colorful medieval fantasy game. It's not just super drab and dark, it's extremely colorful. And the gameplay was so simple and easy to understand. Anyone can play it. You don't have to learn even to parry. You don't really even have to learn, like, resistances or anything. You can just bang your head against the wall and finish it. But if you do pay attention to the little details, if you follow the logic of the game, you know, and allow yourself to die and be killed and get over it, you will be extremely rewarded. Also, this game focuses a lot on exploration, whereas a lot of action RPG games of the past did not, I guess, at least not that I'd played. I suppose that is kind of the focus of all previous From Software games, too, though, like King's Field and Eternal Ring and things like that I'd never played. First-person games, though, they were. Who doesn't love a zombie apocalypse? I don't. I usually don't like zombie apocalypses in modern times. I think it's way oversaturated. Shooting zombies with guns is a little boring and played out to me. So, in the fantasy setting, I thought it was pretty cool. It's my experience, my subjective experience. But yeah, Dark Souls allows you to upgrade yourself, your weapons, your armor, to an extent that most bosses will not give you too much trouble if you do so. If you prepare for it, if you grind. If you don't, you will get absolutely smashed many, many times. But it is not necessary for you to experience that, to experience the game. And I definitely looked up things my first playthrough, for sure. So it was kind of magical after I realized that I could grind and level up and upgrade my armor, because it made every boss that was troubling me before, easy. So then I was like, oh, well, I can do this with any build I want. So I went back and restarted multiple times with different builds and ended up playing the game like 40 times without doing most of the optional content. And then looking things up every... And the rest is history, really. I like to experience every Souls game one build at a time, with one weapon, one armor set, and just play it out and see how it feels against every enemy. And for the most part, Dark Souls 1 does allow you to get away with using low-level items in the endgame, especially if you know where to go and at what time. Because if you go to certain bosses at certain levels, you'll have a harder time than if you went somewhere else. And that's great. I love that. Finding the best way to make it easy on yourself is a really fun puzzle to kind of figure out and decode and explore. I've never seen the Kingdom TV series, Mr. Higgles. I don't think I ever heard of it, even. Next, so Dark Souls 1 and its DLC. Because I think I always knew about the DLC. I never played the game without its DLC. Excellent game. Even with the low FPS that it had at the time. Like in Blighttown, it would get down to like 5 FPS, and it was way worse. The remaster makes that place easy, comparatively. A lot of people say that they were dreading going through Blighttown and actually didn't have that much of an issue because they only ever played it on the remaster. Or went in a certain gate, certain direction that makes it easier. But yeah, Dark Souls 1, the one that started it all for me. I've been in love with it ever since. My previous favorite game of all time was Crash Bandicoot, followed by Kirby and Donkey Kong Country, and then Ocarina of Time. So this is a very different game for me to enjoy, although I did love Ocarina of Time. That game changed me as a youngling, a youngster, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like Dark Souls so much. It has a lot of Zelda DNA in it, without the puzzles that I found confusing and time-consuming. So there we have it. Dark Souls 1 is definitely an S-tier masterclass in level design, character design, armor sets, lore. Oh man, the lore. It's so good because you don't really have to know much in order to get the idea, the general gist of what's going on in the world and why you're doing it. But the more you look into it, the more you can understand. So there's really no secrets left undiscovered in Dark Souls 1 by me, and most mysteries have been fleshed out. It's great. There's not a lot of mystery left in the world of Souls, because the developers actually put most of what is discernible about the world in the game to be found, in the form of item descriptions and, visual storytelling. It's grand. So, next, I played Dark Souls 2. And Dark Souls 2 is definitely not as good as Dark Souls 1, just for the fact that it doesn't have as open of a world, does not have as fast of combat. You are definitely locked into animations whenever you attack. But that also means it's a much more strategic game, one that focuses a lot more on numbers than it does twitch reflexes. And that is appreciable. It's definitely not the same tier as Dark Souls 1, but it's still a masterpiece. It's the second I played, and I thought it was impossible to begin with. I thought it was way harder than Dark Souls. And that's my fault, because I definitely didn't know what I was doing. I didn't grind. And if I had, I would have thought it's easier than Dark Souls, because you can get just, if not more, overpowered in Dark Souls 2 faster than you can in Dark Souls 1. You just can. But that kind of slow combat feeling does stop a lot of people from wanting to play it more, especially because the game is... Wait a minute, this is Dark Souls Remastered, and this is Dark Souls 1. Why are they both here? I thought that was Dark Souls 2. I saw the blue color and I was like, oh, that's Dark Souls 2. It's not. Dark Souls 2, there it is. That's Scholar of the First Sin, though, and I didn't start with Scholar of the First Sin. I started with Dark Souls 2 Original. And they are very different. I'm not sure which one I prefer, though. Dark Souls Scholar of the First Sin or Dark Souls 2. Either way, Dark Souls 2 took me a long time to defeat. I got really stuck at the Lost Sinner because I didn't know where else to go. And Majula is laid out like a wheel, right? Where all the different spokes on the wheel end up in different boss fights. And you have to go all the way back to Majula to start on another journey. Which is not interconnected, right? Dark Souls 1, one of the best things about it is the interconnected nature of its world. You can find all kinds of checkpoints that lead into other shortcuts that lead back to Firelink Shrine or into other areas. You can get to Valley of the Drakes from Firelink Shrine. You can then get to Londor from Valley of the Drakes. You can get also to Blighttown from Valley of the Drakes. You can get to so many places. It's incredible. You can also get to Lower Londor from Valley of the Drakes once you have drained Londor. It's ridiculous the number of places you can get to. You can also get to the Catacombs from Firelink. You can also get to Blighttown, as well as to Gwyn's last fight. Like, the Gwyn fight is very close to Firelink Shrine. Like, the way to the final boss is in Firelink Shrine. And I think that's amazing. Amazing level design. Dark Souls 2's level design is not bad, but it's not interconnected. You do have to... I will say, though, all the interesting places to go do connect to Majula, which is cool when you realize it. But it's not easy to realize that when you begin. You'll go in one direction and be like, oh, I've reached a dead end. Now what? And nobody is there to tell you, go back to Majula and go into another direction. But that's neither here nor there. I do think the level design is subpar to Dark Souls, but I do like the use of color. It's darker, but there's a lot more green. And there is some variety to the color palettes. There's fire, there's snow, there's green forests, there's dark green forests, very shiny castle towns, and the DLCs are some of the hardest DLCs in Souls history. So there is challenge to be had if you want it. The bonfire aesthetic system is brilliant because you can easily make the game harder on yourself if you want. If you want it easier on yourself, you grind. And you can purchase everything you need at the end for upgrade materials so that the DLC is that much easier. So there is that. So next, we have... Well, Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin adds a lot of enemies, right? I guess I should touch on Dark Souls Scholar of the First Sin. I love Dark Souls 2, but it is a bit easier. It's a very different experience. If you really like Dark Souls 2, you will really like Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. It adds a lot of bosses, changes enemy placements, overall adds many hours to the Dark Souls 2 experience, even though it's basically the same maps, which is interesting, and added content. Bon voyage, thanks for watching, God bless, fare thee well, and bon voyage, Don Voyage. Excited to see the finished tier list. Yes, I look forward to seeing you see it. Please like, subscribe, and comment below as to your thoughts on this tier list. Okay. So yeah, a lot of my favorite armor sets come from Dark Souls 2. My favorite boss, the Mira Knight. His design is amazing, and you can get his armor and weapons, which is very exciting because I love being able to wear and use his armor and weapons. In Dark Souls 2, you can get rid of all the enemies by killing them over 12 times each, because then they don't respawn. Yes, if you're having a hard time with Dark Souls 2, Despawning the enemies by killing them over and over is actually a viable method of making the game easier for yourself. Because you'll both be getting souls and depleting the area of hard-to-reach, or hard enemies that will allow you to reach those areas you want to get more easily. And I enjoy that. Well, there were definitely, in the original Dark Souls 2, some bonfires that had enemies that would aggro immediately onto you while sitting at the bonfire, and that was silly. So they did change that in Scholar of the First Sin, and I appreciate it. Most people hate Dark Souls 2 because it's so different from Dark Souls 1. It doesn't look the same. It looks better, I would say, graphically, most of the time. The textures aren't even that bad, especially in the Scholar of the First Sin edition. Some say they prefer the look of the original Dark Souls 2. I don't see too much of a difference. They both look good, though, I think. But they don't look like next-gen. And the character creator it's better than Dark Souls 1. I do prefer it to the Dark Souls 1 character creation. But it's of a peculiar style. All of the characters have a very kind of anime look and a very top-heavy build. Not sure why. Even though you do have some control over that. Majula is so pretty. It is a lot of people's favorite hub world of the Soul series, and as you can hear in the background, hopefully, Majula's music is playing. It's beautiful. Truly melancholy, but also very calming. So yes. I also like Filing Shrine. Like, that is so memorable. It's a lot brighter, and its music is also, it's very similar, but a bit more musical, and very mournful. Majula's is a bit more mystical and, like, magical. Less sad. Though it does have that dark tinge to it. There is a lot I love to Dark Souls 2. Just about every weapon I've ever used in it is viable up to the very end. The DLCs, though, get so difficult that they do make some weapons and builds not viable, which I dislike. I think what I like about Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2 is that most weapons are balanced, so that if you spec into them, you'll have a pretty easy time in the endgame. Although I did realize recently, after playing through all of the games multiple times, you will have an easy time if you just choose the highest damage weapons. And that is very fun to do. Choose the highest damage, base damage weapons, and focus on scaling with them, and you will do well. The game will be easy. If you are very set in your ways and want to use a lower tier weapon, lower base damage weapon, you will have a harder time. It's true. But you will be able to beat the game if you have patience and consistency. So, I mean, that's the Souls formula right there in a nutshell. At least thematically. The idea of a dark world that is constantly dying, and you're just one of a million zombie souls trying to, fight back against the darkness. It's really powerful, because it can definitely teach you some very important psychological, philosophical, and moral lessons about staying true to your beliefs and sticking to it and never backing down. Even when you fail, even when you are defeated or rejected, you get back up, soldier. And you get good, as they say, as I like to say. And that means doing whatever is necessary to beat the game. Getting good does not mean going naked with a club at level 1 and beating the game. Like, it's cool if you can do that, if you enjoy it, but these are games. It's not... Like, I don't see there being much importance to, like, saying, oh, I beat Dark Souls 1 naked with a club. It's like, good for you. How long did that take? If you didn't enjoy it, what's the point? I'm not going to, like, pat you on the back and be like, oh, you're amazing because you did that. It's all about enjoyment. That does mean you have a lot of skill in it, but it's a video game. Unless you are planning to make a career out of the video game when it comes to skill and competition, maybe doing speed runs, then what's the point of the clout, you know? Shadow Tuner says, I'd rather get OP and just demolish everything. That is exactly my feeling, and that's what I enjoy doing in every one of these games. Getting OP and destroying anything in your way is so fun, because your first playthrough is generally very miserable in these games, because you don't know how to do that yet. But once you know how, and you go back to enemies and bosses that have given you a hard time, it is so satisfying to just trounce them. Be like, "Puh, you used to, make me cry. Look who's crying now." I can kill everything with a spatula. Hooray! There is that too. Once you get good enough to actually, play through naked with a spoon, with a ladle in Dark Souls 2, that feels really good, right? But hopefully not for the point of getting brownie points with everyone else, or saying I'm better than you. That's the wrong way to go about life in general. But yeah, I feel like Dark Souls 2 is actually a great sequel to Dark Souls 1. It just has a lot to live up to, and a lot of experimental systems that went unappreciated. I think they had a lot of issues it's obvious that they had a lot of issues in development, and didn't know exactly where they were going to go with the game before a new lead director had to step in and recreate the game more in line with what Dark Souls 1 was. And people blame the B team of Dark Souls 2 for why it, is a different game than Dark Souls 1, and why it's so weird and so different and has some issues. But they forget that Miyazaki and just about everyone who worked on Dark Souls 1 worked on Dark Souls 2. Okay? They all had a say. Miyazaki wasn't just off on vacation while other people played or built Dark Souls 2. They had to go through him to get everything approved, and if he didn't like it, then he would have changed it. But he had to sign off on every little thing. He was not only the assistant director, but he's the head of the company. And he could have changed it if he wanted. But he liked Dark Souls 2, and they ended up implementing a lot of what was great about Dark Souls 2 into Elden Ring. Remember that when it comes time to get to Elden Ring. I'm better than you. Yeah. Classic competitive spirit. It's good to be competitive, but not when the whole point is just to trounce other people. Okay. Bettering oneself should always be the purpose. So, Dark Souls 2, great game. I love the RPG elements. Really feels like every build is viable and that you can create your own character and beat the game with it handily. It's great. So after that, I played Dark Souls 3. It was several years later when I played Dark Souls 3. And, yeah, I played it and I enjoyed it. I found it very gray, or very orange, one or the other. Let's zoom in a bit, if we can. Can we zoom in? Zoom, zoom, zoom. This thing can fit even more closely. There we go! Yay! Look at that, you can see it now. Yeah, zoom, 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 zoom. So yeah, Dark Souls 3, I didn't much care for the look of it at all. I thought it looked, cool. I thought it looked slightly better. At least the character models look way better than Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2. But the world looked so gray and desaturated of color that I could not appreciate the graphical updates that had gone on. So visually, I think Dark Souls 3 looks the least appealing to me, even though it may be the highest graphical fidelity. I don't care about graphical fidelity at all in video games. I think art style and color choice matter a lot more than graphical fidelity. I think Dark Souls 3 proves it. There are a lot of really good maps, good level design, but I think the lack of color really saps it of its life. And it's lore related because the fire fades and all of that, being supposedly the final one in the series. But it just looks bad, man. I want it to be more colorful. Either way, the gameplay is much more similar to Dark Souls 1 than Dark Souls 3, or 2. Dark Souls 3 is much more similar to Dark Souls 1 than 2, combat-wise. But they did increase the speed a little bit of rolling and running. When you run in Dark Souls 3 compared to Dark Souls 2, it's like... It's completely different. Multiple times faster. Although, the movement speed in Dark Souls 2 is not slow. I once thought it was, like treading water, but when I played it recently, it's actually much faster to control your character than Dark Souls 1. So, do with that what you will. Dark Souls 3 is much faster, much more rigorous, much more demanding of the player, and is so balanced that, and so linear in its level design, that you cannot possibly get more overpowered in certain areas after a certain point. Like, you can only grind so much in Dark Souls 3 before you just have to go to a new area. Every area that you get to is multiple times harder than the previous area. Enemies have... like, the difference between level 1 and level 2 is staggering in terms of enemy HP and damage output. And it's like that every level. It's massive step up. You're like, okay, I'm finally doing something. I finally got all of the Titanite shards as I could out of this area. I upgraded my weapon as much as I could with Titanite shards, and now there are no large Titanite in this area. I just need to go to the next one. I think I can take it on. You go to the next area. Enemies that look the same, that have the same moves, are two-shotting you when they couldn't three-shot you before. And you have to do 3 to 6 hits on them in order to kill them when it took 1 to 2 hits before. It's massive. The scaling of every level, it's a massive difficulty spike in every level, in every respect. And it definitely feels more like a traditional action RPG, like a traditional action game. And the RPG elements are really just like, what do you want to wear, and what weapon type do you choose? And I feel like they definitely nerfed the basic magic and the basic faith spells as well, so those are less interesting playstyles to utilize. Like, it's cool for an optional, like, little bit of intelligence so you can use some ranged spells, or a little bit of faith so you can heal yourself a little bit. But if your main damage stats are faith or intelligence, you're going to have a harder time than just strength or dex. And I feel like that's a massive missed opportunity. Dark Souls 2, in comparison, both faith and intelligence, like spells and miracles, are incredibly powerful compared to Dark Souls 3. Spells especially. Magic is really fun in Dark Souls 2. I would recommend, if you have had a hard time with Dark Souls 2, play a spellcaster and grind a lot. Do that, and you will enjoy it far more than any magic build in Dark Souls 3. I feel like they also decreased the range of spells in Dark Souls 3, so it's just harder overall. But if you use a high-damage strength weapon in Dark Souls, it's easy. You can get through it fast. And it does seem to be implied that, by a lot of different people on the internet, that Dark Souls 3 is the shortest game in the series. It contains the least number of bosses that you need to kill so far in order to complete the game. So it's just less game, but harder. But it does, you know, the armor sets in it do look beautiful. Most of the cool armor sets that exist in it come from Dark Souls 2, that I like. But it does add some good ones, like the Rogue Knight armor. I love that stuff. But it does have some really epic enemies, and mostly in the DLCs, I gotta say. Like, Slave Knight Gale is a very special fight, and it's exceedingly fun and satisfying to defeat it. I used spears last time, and absolutely destroyed Slave Knight Gale in 2 tries. It was hard, but I didn't die more than that. And it felt great, because I died like, I don't know, 15 to 20 times my first playthrough. And those DLCs are way harder than the DLCs in Dark Souls 2, I gotta say. So, it makes a lot of the other builds not viable as well, unfortunately. I have a lot negative to say about Dark Souls 3, but I don't hate it. I think it's a really good game. It's a masterpiece of a game. All of these are masterpieces. This is not, like, spectacular, amazing, okay, bad, and worst. These are hyper masterpiece, best in the business, like untouchable, masterpiece yet slightly flawed, masterpiece but very flawed, masterpiece but a bunch of issues, and masterpiece but not very enjoyable. You know what I mean? Like, these are all, like, the whole AAA gaming industry could learn a lot by taking from any of these games. Anything from any of them. So after I played Dark Souls 3, and enjoyed it, I played it a lot more and realized it is way harder, objectively speaking, than either of these, Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2. With less content, and with less viable builds overall. Even though it has more weapons and more armor sets than the previous two. It's weird. And I don't get it. So in the end, it's a little bit less, has less replay value. But I will continue to play it because it has that basic From Software goodness. The combat, the simplicity of the combat, and the exploration. It's impeccable. It's great. And for the levels that do exist, they are also interconnected with themselves, even if they're not interconnected with Firelink Shrine. So, moving on. I next played Bloodborne. This is a little bit out of chronological order. I played them out of chronological order, but I did play Dark Souls 1, then 2, then 3, then Bloodborne. But Bloodborne came out before Dark Souls 3. But I didn't know that, so I played Bloodborne. I bought a PS4 just so I could play Bloodborne. Bought it on sale, by the way. Bloodborne was $20 with the DLC, which is an amazing DLC, by the way. And my PS4 I bought for like $200, so excellent savings. Quite a deal. And I would say this game is way better, for me anyway, than any of the others. It is so close to perfect in its design, philosophy, in its speed, its combat, its weapons, the type of weapons. Like, every single weapon, because of the fact that every weapon has 2 different forms, means that they have to be balanced. Right? So any weapon that you get is balanced to be viable in the endgame. It just is, and in the DLC. So if you build on that, you have to utilize the weapons to their strengths. And when you do, it's exceedingly rewarding, and none of them feel like they are useless or non-viable. So every build that you can come up with is viable. Like, it just is. A lot of people say Arcane is the least viable. It is the hardest to get going. But once it gets going, it smashes the ever-loving crap out of the rest of the game. And I love that. I love doing that. It's a game with an inverted difficulty curve. Like, instead of getting harder, the more you learn, the more you play it, the easier it gets. So the end bosses are generally some of the easiest in the game, surprisingly. Outside of the double boss fight at the end, which can be very challenging, which is nice, but it's not as challenging as figuring out the game from the start, though. There is nothing as difficult as that. Bloodborne starts hard as nails, and it gets easier the more you have access to armor sets and grinding and levels and more weapons that you want to try out. Did you play any of the other games on the PS4? All the, like, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 I played... No, Dark Souls 1 and 2... Wait a minute, let me think. I think I played Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 all on the Xbox 360. Was Dark Souls 3 available on the Xbox 360? I think it was. Either way, Bloodborne is the one I played on PS4 first. That I remember. Yeah, I never played Infamous or Uncharted. Notorious Karan! I see you there. So anyway, Bloodborne, its lore is so well hidden through the world, and you are told at the beginning not to care about it, and just to go beast hunting, which I love role-playing a beast hunter in Bloodborne. I love it. I love the... Dracula is one of my favorite books, probably up there with Lord of the Rings for me, and I love Gothic horror, or just Gothic books in general, and the Victorian era, and the Edwardian era, and, you know, everything about Bloodborne and its aesthetic is right up my alley. So not only did they nail the aesthetics, they also nailed the level design. There are interconnected levels that connect back with the cathedral. You do also have the hub world, much like you have in Dark Souls 3, that is disconnected from the rest of the game. But it feels way more fleshed out as to why that is than Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is just like, you're on an island somewhere, slightly connected to Lothric Castle, but there's no way back to Lothric Castle for no reason. You can't see Firelink Shrine from anywhere else in the game, so it feels completely disconnected. Bloodborne, you're literally in a dream world. Out there, somewhere. That is being fueled by alien eldritch horrors. Which is, I mean, also, the Lovecraftian influence is so cool. I love Lovecraft as well. So it's just... Oh man, there's nothing I really dislike about Bloodborne, except for the idea that you cannot... Like, maybe the idea of being able to turn off blood would be nice. That'd be a nice option. I would appreciate that. I think that would make it more accessible to people of younger ages. Although Bloodborne is meant to be a bloody nightmare, which I appreciate as well. That feeling of fighting your deepest, darkest nightmares and winning. Hunting your nightmares. On the back of the box it says, "Hunt your nightmares." I love that so much, that idea. The more gruesome the monster, the more fun it is to kill. The more rewarding it is to kill. Yes, Bloodborne's style is the best. I love medieval fantasy, but honestly, the Gothic, Victorian aesthetic is not utilized very much, especially not in action games. And Bloodborne does it best so far. I've not played a game that is as fun to play or fast and rewarding as Bloodborne. It's also very simple to play as well, similar to Dark Souls 1. The game's exclusive to platforms is the final boss for any Dark Souls game. Yep, just have to buy the buy the console. But yeah, I actually was quite depressed before I bought Bloodborne, and I feel like kind of taking out my angst in Bloodborne and kind of dealing with my issues at the same time really helped me. Because it felt like I was doing the same thing in Bloodborne as I was doing in real life, metaphorically. Fighting my nightmares, my deepest, darkest fears, and, just, fighting against the evils of my world at the time. So, it really helped with my depression, and I've heard that same story with a lot of other people. Helped me get through a very dark time in my life, identifying with the main character. It's very fun to do. RP, man. Roleplay in Bloodborne is good, too. Alrighty then. After I played Bloodborne, I played Sekiro. And I thought Sekiro was going to be another From Software action RPG in the style of the other Souls games. I thought it was going to be a Souls-like, just like the rest, just set in Japan, with samurai or ninja skills. But no, it's entirely different. It's 100% an action game with a big focus on the beat, parrying, and deflecting. It's a rhythm game, and I'm horrible at rhythm games. So, I really feel like the extent to which you are already skilled at rhythm games, that will tell you how much you enjoy Sekiro. If you really like parrying in the other Souls games, and that's like the way you play them, then Sekiro will be fun for you. If you don't do that, if you focus like me on leveling up and overpowering your enemies with stats, then Sekiro will be a nightmare because it forces you to use your skill, your IRL rhythm capabilities to defeat enemies. And every enemy can kill you so easily. So, I kind of hate Sekiro. It is a masterpiece in terms of game design, and color, and level design, but I don't want to play it anymore. I got up to the end boss, Ashina, Sword Saint Ishin, and I spent like 3 days, 9 hours trying to play it, and just could not do it. And was like, you know what? I'm getting so frustrated. I'm getting so many negative thoughts playing this game. I cannot do it anymore. So I literally took the CD out, the disc, out into my backyard, threw it, and crushed it with a rock. Because I couldn't handle it. And if I had kept that game, I probably would have kept grinding my gears until I beat it. And I didn't even enjoy the game to begin with. I was just trying to beat it for the sake of the stream, and for the sake of being able to say that I did it. But what, like I said before, why was I doing that? Just for clout? Like, who would be impressed if I beat the game? I guess people who hadn't beat the game before, but why would I want to, belittle others by saying, hey, you didn't beat the game that I did? Games are supposed to be fun. And I did not find Sekiro fun. I found it challenging, and found it satisfying sometimes to defeat a hard enemy, but it's a good game for completely different reasons than any of the other Souls games, outside of that, being patient and keeping with it. But if you don't like the base gameplay, then don't play it. That's my philosophy. So, it's down here. If you love Sekiro and you think it's up here, I don't disagree with you. Like, it's a great game. Masterful. Every frame a painting, really. But, I could not stand the gameplay. If you can dance, you can Sekiro. Exactly. Never really played a rhythm game except Sekiro, and I've never heard any other game being called a rhythm game. But it's a massive genre. It's all music, like playing a game to the beat of actual songs. That's what rhythm games are. And there are other games too that are action games, but also fight to the beat. I mean, most recently, there's Metal Hellsinger, where you have to shoot your enemies to the beat, which is interesting. But that's very recent. IRL skill. I can see the thing and still walk face first into it. Yes, Elfie. Sekiro either feels amazing to you, or like absolute crap. Makes you feel like crap. Like, I heard somewhere that someone said, Sekiro makes you feel horrible when you fail, but it makes you feel like a god when you do a single parry. I never felt that way. A single parry just meant you didn't get hit, to me. You need to parry some bosses like 90 times before they break posture. And then, guess what? Once you stab them once, you have to do it all over again. I found that so incredibly tedious and frustrating. Didn't feel like a game, but a chore. after a while. I say, as we smash late 1900 technology with a bat in a field. I mean, games are for fun. Like, Mario was fun to play. I never beat Mario, but I enjoyed it, you know? Sekiro is not a Souls game. It's more like Batman Arkham series. You're probably right, Ninja Gaming, which is why I also don't play those games. It is funny, I have heard that from other people too, and I just didn't know. Another reason to not pre-order games, friends. I watched as little gameplay as possible from Sekiro. I saw some clips and thought, that looks really cool. I'm sure it's going to change. The gameplay is going to change as you play through it. You probably get more weapons and armor sets. You don't. You don't. You get some tools that you can use maybe 10 times, and then you're out of them, and then you have to grind for more things. Anyway, I found it so tedious, man. Oh my gosh. I'm kind of done talking about Sekiro. Parry the game. Devs gotta add settings for parry windows. Parry windows. That would be nice. I mean, that's the whole idea of, like, I made a video on difficulty, like ease of access and difficulty settings for games. I think all Souls games would be improved by having difficulty settings. Not because journalists need to be able to beat the game in order to review it and give it a good score, but because it would be fun to be able to play an easy on easy mode and have one experience, medium mode have another experience, hard mode have a harder experience, challenge, and upwards. One of the reasons why Dark Souls 2 is way up here is because it has so many dynamic difficulty settings that you can add to it. You can make it as hard as or easy as you want it. And that's fantastic. I do wish the rest of the games had something like that, though. But a simple, like, increase HP and damage on enemies or decrease it would help massively with replayability of all of these games, and they already have amazing replay value outside of Sekiro, which is the same game and no roleplay options, sadly. Okay, you can't even upgrade the entire, like, tools list in one playthrough. So you literally just have to play through the same game the same way again in order to play a different way. Maxed out. Anyway, so much stuff to talk about. But the next game I played was Demon Souls Remake. Woohoot! I bought a PS5 just so I could play Demon Souls, just like I bought a PS4. And I bought it on a price hike for at least $100 extra. And it was worth it. The PS5, that is. And Demon Souls was also worth the $70 I paid for it. Should PS5 games be $70? No. No. But, that being said, I'd never played Demon Souls before, but watching people play Demon Souls is what made me want to stream games, like, as a career. Because I watched Lobos Jr. play Demon Souls, the original, way back in 2015, and I was like, oh, he's just playing through a game, and people are watching him. And this game is, like, really slow and tedious, but he's enjoying it, and people are enjoying watching him. There are, like, thousands of people watching him. And so I was inspired by that, and Demon Souls is actually what got me interested in doing this every day. So I played it, I played the remaster, and it was so beautiful. I actually thought that the Demon Souls remaster looked really unfaithful to the original, which, in terms of visuals, it is. It updates them, and it also changes them. It updates the sound effects, and it changes them. Nothing looks exactly like the original game, and that is a shame, but it looks so darn good that I don't think it matters. There are some lore things, even, that are not involved anymore because they change, like, color as well as shape of things. So, like, yellow ribbons and yellow cloth, yellow blankets, what do you call them? Banners, yellow banners, that took me a while, are hanging everywhere in the Tower of... What's it called? Not Tower of Power. What's it called? Help me, somebody. Tower of Latria. That's it. In the Tower of Latria, in the original game, there are yellow banners everywhere. And when you get to the end of the Tower of Latria section, you fight the guy with the giant yellow towel on his head. Forget his name. But it all kind of, works together. The visuals work together in the original to tell the lore. In Demon Souls, they're red banners. Why? Because it looks cool? So that's something that's, it's not a very faithful adaptation visually, but it's a very faithful adaptation gameplay-wise. And you know me, I only care about gameplay. And Demon Souls has almost the same, gameplay as Dark Souls 1. So, for me, this game feels better to play than Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro. I really enjoy just hacking and slashing things in Demon Souls. Not as much as Dark Souls, but because it's also a really hardcore game. It's very difficult to get into because you cannot level up until after the first level. You have to beat it at level 1, which does teach you how to play the game, just like Bloodborne, in fact. Bloodborne and Demon Souls are connected lore-wise, or at least were supposed to be at one point, and I think they still are. But they also share a lot of design influences, where Bloodborne has a hub world where you have to level up at a female, a maiden, and so does Demon Souls. You go into a different realm, a different dimension, and have to go through portals in order to get anywhere, just like in Demon Souls, in Bloodborne. A lot of similarities here, and you cannot level up until after the first boss in Bloodborne, just like you cannot level up until after the first boss in Demon Souls. So, at least the remake feels fantastic to play, because it feels the same as Demon Souls. So, I've never played Demon Souls, something that tells me I would really enjoy it, but there are conveniences to Demon Souls Remastered that make me think I would probably not enjoy the original Demon Souls as much. Just because load screens took several minutes sometimes to get you into the game in the original, and you could not send items back to the infinite, near infinite storage in the original, which you can in the remake. So, yeah, I feel like both of these games are worth playing, but for slightly different reasons, even if the gameplay is the same. So, Demon Souls is an S, whether it's the remake or the original. Sometimes I just go back into Demon Souls just to hear the sound effects, because they're so good, so well done. Just put those headphones on and enjoy the atmosphere. I'd love to do the same with Demon Souls one day, but maybe I'll emulate it. We'll see. I don't have access to a PS3, but, if anyone wants to give me one with a Demon Souls copy, I'd be very appreciative. Okay, now then, Elden Ring. This is the final game in the series so far, and the last one I played. I'm still not sure about where to put it. It has very similar combat and speed to Dark Souls 3. It's actually slightly slower than Dark Souls 3, in fact. You cannot run as fast, and you cannot roll as quickly. But you have higher invincibility frames on rolls, and the roleplay element is so much better than Dark Souls 3 or Dark Souls 2. Although there are less cool armor sets in Elden Ring than in Dark Souls 2 or 3, which is sad. I am looking forward, however, to the unannounced paid DLC that will be coming in. Oh, Elden Ring! This game was so hyped up, and it lived up to the hype to such a high degree. I played the beta, the closed network beta, and that was some of the most enjoyable video gaming I'd ever experienced. Because the reveal of the open world for the first time was just breathtaking, in a way that no other open world was, to me. And they made use of the graphical fidelity that they have, but it still looks like a slight improvement on Dark Souls 3 graphics. It doesn't look at all as good as Sekiro, though. That's the funny thing. They had to decrease, I think, the graphical fidelity in order to make such a massive world, and that's fine with me, because the gameplay I enjoy way more than Sekiro. So, Elden Ring, where do I place it? It also has tons of... the first playthrough I did, I ended after 175 hours, and I was not tired of playing it. It also has one of the most challenging bosses in all of Souls, Melania. And the last two bosses are definitely extremely challenging, but nothing comes close to Melania. Let's see. I think I like it more than... Oh, this is tough. Do I like it more than Dark Souls 2? I have no idea. See, I don't think I would ever just play Elden Ring, just open it up and say, I'm bored, I'm going to play the first few areas of Elden Ring. Because whenever you play Elden Ring, you are committing yourself to a journey. This is not a small romp through a dark, gritty world, like Dark Souls 3. This is not a somewhat long action RPG with, a focus on stat leveling like Dark Souls 2. This is a Lord of the Rings size trek across a massive island continent that will bring you into conflict with all kinds of factions and into friendship with all kinds of friends. The Elden Ring is the friends we made along the way. Yeah. And some really great bosses, man. I love Elden Beast, I love Mogwin, in the Mogwin Dynasty. Melania, I'm not sure whether I like or hate. She's so difficult, and definitely makes that mistake, I feel it's a mistake, that a lot of people who want challenge make, by making a lot of what used to be a viable build completely useless against her. She has resistances against Holy, she has some resistances against just about everything, except for Fire, Bleed, and Frost. She's resistant to just about everything else. Magic, dexterity builds without Bleed are next to useless. Every time I play her, I have to, fight her and lose for about 3 hours before I work up the skills to win. And a lot of it is RNG. You don't know when she's about to do Waterfowl Dance. So she is a problematic boss for me, because I'm not sure whether I love or hate her. But, Godfrey, really cool fight. Horlo, really cool fight. Margit, showing up 3 times, is really cool. I love the dual bosses. I think they add an interesting take on the same boss. I never really had a whole lot of issue with any of the dual bosses. And that's not me saying, oh, I'm so good at this game. I just, like I say, I grind as much as possible in every playthrough to make sure that it's not as difficult. Sure, there's some skill involved, but yeah, I do enjoy the dual boss fights. I do. And finding the same boss to fight over again is exciting to me, because I'm like, oh, I already beat this boss, I know how to beat him again. Now that he's harder, I wonder how I'll do against him, and then I, fight, and it's fun. It's fun to refight bosses for me. Melania is a Sekiro in a Souls game. You are so right, Gimp Ninja Gaming. There are a few bosses that are very obviously influenced by Sekiro boss design. Margit as well, I think. Oh yeah, they definitely should bring back upgrading armor into Souls games, patch it right in. Yeah, that stopped at Dark Souls, Bloodborne. Because Bloodborne came out before Dark Souls 3, and they never went back to it, and I'm so mad. I would love to upgrade armor in Elden Ring. Make my favorite armor set viable in the endgame, even if it's light. So, I don't know. I'm tempted to put it behind Dark Souls 2, but it's such a much more bigger game. There is so much more to it. I think it deserves to be higher. We'll put it in S tier. Just... Or... I don't know. Another thing is, the order in which you play these games does give you a bit of a changed feeling toward them. Do I like Elden Ring more than Dark Souls 2? I don't even know, man. I can't say. They're very similar, I feel. In like what they focus on. Elden Ring is much more of a journey, much like Dark Souls 1 felt like, but much more and bigger. But it doesn't have those upgrade and strategic choices like Dark Souls 2 that I love. Do I like it more than Demon Souls? See, Elden Ring is so similar to so many Souls games that it's hard to place it. It's definitely better than Dark Souls 3. Yeah, let's just put it in S tier along with these. So, to recap. Bloodborne is my favorite. Dark Souls 1 is my second favorite, whether it's the remaster or the original. Demon Souls, remake especially, extremely fun to go back to and just whack things in. And a very short game, so it never overstays its welcome. A lot of builds I have not tried in that, even though I've played it about 6 times. And Elden Ring, there is so much replay value, it's insane. But that is number 4. And then Dark Souls 2 is number 5. And then Dark Souls 3 is number 6. And Sekiro is number 7. Whether it's in C or D. It's definitely not my favorite. Elden Ring, in your opinion, is a beast. An end in of itself, taking the best from all of FromSoft's successes. Yes, it doesn't take benefits from all of FromSoft's successes. It definitely leaves some things from these games on the table that should have been in there as well. And it makes some pitfalls. Like, I do believe that the Mountain of the Giants and the Fire Giant boss fight are really disappointing. There's not much in there to enjoy. It's just like, here is an area... It's actually much like a snowy version of the Demon Ruins, where they just threw in a bunch of the same high-level enemy from before that used to be bosses, made them normal enemies, and then called it quits for that area. It's a very vertical area, but it's just so bland. They reused assets for the giant, statues, the dead giants everywhere. And there's just one chapel in it. It's a very small area. I hate that area. It's very much the same type of deal as Demon Ruins. So that brings it down, right? There are some places and things that bring down Elden Ring for me. I didn't like having to go back through and redo the exact same ritual in the underground in order to fight the same boss, which was the deer, the ancestral spirit. That was a little silly. And it's a smaller area, too, when you go do it again. It's just a different area with the same boss. I don't know. Weird choices. But it's beautiful, even so. And like I say, I do enjoy fighting the same boss over again, but getting to it in the same way, in a different place that looks the same with the same enemies. A little weird. There are definitely some places where the game feels like they felt the need to pad it out, and that's sad. Also, Bloodborne's Chalice dungeons are amazing, both conceptually and the way they are in the game. And Elden Ring's catacombs are a sad version of that. Lifeless version of that. There are a couple that are really memorable, but other than that, they felt like just like pop in, fight a boss, and leave, and you don't get much souls out of any of the catacombs, and you don't get very good rewards outside of a few weapons, a few armor pieces, and a bunch of spirit ashes. Like, that's mainly the reason to go into catacombs, is the spirit ashes. And the heroes' graves are the worst parts of Dark Souls 2 put back into the game. It's like, it's a catacomb that just is a repeat of Dark Souls 2's, like, what was it called? Ghostly Chariot boss fight? It was awful. I hate them. I don't want to go into any of the old hero catacombs anymore because I know what's going to be in there, and it's not fun. So generally, in playthroughs that I will do in the future for Elden Ring, I will only ever do those catacombs that I know I need weapons from, or items. And that's fun, like figuring out what the right route is for your build. It's cool. So I'd be willing to go back through any one of them, but going through all of them in every playthrough, that's too much. Also, there is definitely a sense of boredom and tedium that comes from playing Elden Ring too much. Because you can't beat it in a short period of time, you feel like you should beat it, and so you keep playing, and then you play for too long, and then you've burnt yourself out. So you do have to be careful with Elden Ring. It can sap your life, but you can also get really tired of it. So those are all the negatives of Elden Ring, but I think the positives outweigh it a lot. A lot. Also, JJ Gaming, greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Charles' Chill Channel and a tier list that we're making together. Unsure if you're aware, but you still have game categories Dark Souls. Yes! Dark Souls 2, hopefully. Is it not Dark Souls 2? Yes, we are making a tier list, Souls tier list. Oops. Well, add time, I guess. But we'll be getting back to the Dark Souls 2 playthrough presently. So yeah, it's not a very conclusive list, because Elden Ring could go either way. Like, it could go up, it could go down, back here, could go back here, could go up here. But it has a ton of replay value, and I do love it. Dearly. Dearly. I have lots of plans for very many builds to play in Elden Ring, but so do I in Dark Souls 2. I feel like it's a little unfair to put it above Dark Souls 2 when I'm enjoying Dark Souls 2 so much recently. But there you go. Double shield! Yes, that's a thing. It's also a thing in Dark Souls 2 I haven't done. I've never done a double shield playthrough. Maybe I should. Maybe I should do a double shield playthrough one of these days. Either way, I think this is where it is for now. Whether or not I like it more than Dark Souls 2 remains to be seen. But either way, thank you all so much for watching. God bless. Fare thee well. Thank you for watching my tier list. Please like, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell for any further videos from yours truly. Goodbye, goodbye, thank you, goodbye. The good Lord loves you, and so do I. Alright. There you have it, friends. That was my Souls tier list. A little bit more meandering than I would have liked, but there you go.